Hello and welcome to another Marketing Sherpa webinar. Today we're going to be sharing some of the top takeaways we learned from Marketing Sherpa Email Summit 2015, which took place just 2 weeks ago at the beautiful Aria Resort in Las Vegas. So first, let me start with the question, why email? Why should we even be talking about email today? Well, we fielded a survey with 2,057 American adults just in January, 2 months ago, and we asked them, how would you prefer companies to speak with you? How would you prefer companies to communicate with you? 72% of us, 72% of those surveyed said email. The second response, the second closest thing was postal mail at 48%. So think about that for a second. 72% said email. The second closest thing was 48%, wasn't even close, and everything, as you can see on the screen, was lower after that. Even when we looked at demographics, because this was balanced across different age groups, different regions, across all age groups, customers told us they prefer to communicate through email. The only closest thing to someone not choosing email as their top choice was women ages 65 and over. 68% preferred postal mail, 68% also preferred email. So clearly, customers want email. So now the question that you have to answer is, how can I make my email the most effective it can be? So to help you answer that question, we're going to be pulling from a lot of information. At Email Summit, we had 497 applications that we went through for people who wanted to speak. We had over 15 hours of content. We had 3 award winners on stage. And now our challenge today, in the next 30 minutes we have, is how can we give you the best takeaways in 30 minutes from all of that content. So to help make that happen, you can tell us what you'd like to learn. You can use hashtag #SherpaEmail on Twitter. Tell us what questions you have. What are the most pressing questions you want to have answered? And we'll change the presentation we have today based on that to try to answer them. But also, if you were at Email Summit, hey, share your top takeaways on hashtag #SherpaEmail as well. Just share your top email marketing takeaways in general. You might find a new peer that you can network with and learn from and improve your email marketing. I am Daniel Burstein. I'm the Director of Editorial Content at Marketing Sherpa, and I was a co-host at Email Summit. And joining me today is Jessica Lorenz, who is behind the stage as the Event Content Manager. Thanks for joining us, Jessica.
Thank you for having me, Daniel. I'm really excited to be here today. I had the privilege of working with these speakers directly, and so it's really exciting to be here and talk about a little bit of my insights and the inside scoop on their content.
Yeah, Jessica worked with, so Email Summit's a little different from other events. Our speakers have told us that other events they can just go, show up, give their presentation and speak. While at Email Summit, Jessica has worked with our speakers for 3-6 months beforehand, making sure we've got their story down, making sure we've got the best takeaways for you. And one of those speakers was Mary Abrahamson, an email marketing specialist at Ferguson Enterprises. And what we learned from Mary is one of the first lessons we're going to share with you today to keep in mind, you are not your customer. So let me tell you what I mean by that. But first, let me tell you a little bit about Mary's journey to understand what she did. So Ferguson Enterprises is an $11 billion company. They're a B2B company. And even though they were of that size, they didn't really have dedicated email marketing. So if you're attending on the webinar today and you say like, hey, don't have a dedicated email marketing manager yet, I'm a big company, I'm a small company, take heart, because you're going to see what Mary was able to do in just 1 year. So she was hired, the first email marketing manager for Ferguson, and she went to Email Summit 2014. She was an attendee there, learned a lot of things. While she came back the following year, Email Summit 2015, and she was on stage as an award winner, our B2B Best Campaign. So we're going to tell you what we learned from Mary in just a moment in that campaign, but first let me thank Blue Hornet, who is the sponsor of this webinar, makes it possible for us to give you this free information, was also the sponsor of the Marketing Sherpa Awards you just saw. Whether your business is large or small, looking to implement basic email marketing programs or develop more sophisticated lifecycle messaging campaigns, Blue Hornet can help. Their unique combination of enterprise-scale email marketing solutions and award-winning services will ensure your email marketing program is a success. You can go to bluehornet.com to learn more. And just so you know, also, all of the case studies that we're sharing with you today, we're going to release the videos next week for free. You can go to marketingsherpa.com session replays. We don't have time to tell you each and every detail from those case studies today, just a few lessons, but you can just go to that URL, sign up, and then next week you can watch the videos yourself. And that URL is going to be shared through hashtag #SherpaEmail along with many more resources. So going back to Mary's story, when she applied to speak at Marketing Sherpa Email Summit, she was able to generate $10.5 million in online sales. Email is a big part of that. By the time she actually came to speak at Email Summit. Because again, it's a several month process where we work with Mary and all of our speakers on the content. She generated over $21 million in email sales, had 486 e-commerce conversions. So there were many ways she did that, but a key way she did that was, again, not thinking that she was the customer, but instead focusing on that customer. And one thing, when she started focusing on the customer, she realized she had to do was segment. So this is what her audience was receiving before. This is not ideal. So at Ferguson, they have many different types of customers that might want to buy from them. For example, there's plumbers, there's HVAC repairmen. There's also home designers. So in this example, you'll see a plumber receiving an email that was meant for a home designer. Again, not very relevant for the plumber, not going to be successful email marketing. So let's take a look at how Mary began to segment. This is an email they call the one-click wonder. So first of all, how many of you out there are segmenting your lists? And of those segmenting your lists, how many different segments do you have? You can feel free to answer on #Sherpa email. For Mary, she found it was about 14 segments that they needed to learn about. So she sent out this simple email. If you haven't segmented your list yet, this could be a great example that you can use, where it's very visual, very easy for them to click and say who they were, whether they were a plumber, facilities, maintenance, builder, whatever it was. And she was able to get some more information to help segment that list, because it all starts with the data. Of course, didn't end there. Once she was building her list, she asked for more information. So some of you might have a lead form that's similar to this, right? All Ferguson was really asking for was the email address and if they were a professional or a homeowner. So there was some small segmentation there, but they changed it. They created a much richer form with a lot more information. And hopefully this is encouragement for those out there who are worried about adding more fields to their forms to get less signups, showing that, hey, the value you can get from that more information is worth it. Also, looking at the fields that Mary has in her form, you have to consider that while these fields were the most appropriate for her forms, only ask the questions and the information that you really need that will help you segment emails to make them more relevant for their audience. So for example, she's asking for the zip code for that company. Well, Ferguson has in-person events, Ferguson has brick and mortar stores, so that geolocation is really important for her company. For your company, if it's, let's say, totally e-commerce, you might not need to know the location. That's one thing that won't be helpful. Another way, and another great example of how Mary thought about her customers and put her customers first and didn't assume she was a customer, is how she approached mobile marketing. So there's a lot of, I'll go to a marketing event and there will be a speaker that's likely a mobile marketing vendor, and he'll say, okay, raise your hands if you have a smartphone. And of course you look around, everybody's hands go up in the room. And then the speaker will always say, see, everyone's on a smartphone. You need whatever my mobile marketing technology is. Well, that is true only if your customers are the people sitting in the room. If your customers are not those people, you need to know only about half, I think the number is 47% of people in America are actually on smartphones. So that might be surprising to us, many marketers who are on smartphones, but again, we have to think like our customers and think, how do they communicate? So in Mary's case, while they had some things available for smartphones, she realized her audience wasn't entirely on smartphones. So she didn't overlook the feature phones. She also used text messaging to her advantage. Another element of how she realized, hey, I'm not the customer, I'm not a plumber, I'm not an HVAC person, I am a marketing manager, is the way she had people sign up to their in-person events. So again, Ferguson, very big company, but it's a very traditional company. They're a wholesaler, they're selling plumbing, HVAC type of equipment. These types of people, they're not as digitally savvy as some other potential customers and other audiences. So their Ferguson Rewards program, their in-person events, previously they had people signing up for those events simply with pen and paper. So of course, if they're signing up with pen and paper, then this causes a lag before that information gets into their database, and it's more prone to errors because who's ever putting in that information can possibly read the email address wrong. So her goal was to get actual digital input of the data. So she had tablet computers at her events. However, she realized, again, her audience not being as digitally savvy, they're less comfortable with tablet computers. Also, we're talking about plumbers, HVAC people. They probably have the same problem I have as what she calls man hands, is that we're trying to click on something, we're clicking on the wrong link, and we're clicking on the wrong information and easily get frustrated. So she also had a keyboard there with the tablet computers so they could input the information. the end result was, again, all of those increase in sales that we saw, but also all of the associates in the Ferguson stores who previously had been a little resistant to change, right? They're in that more traditional mindset, really embraced all that new information that Mary was able to provide for them. As you can see here, they were relying on faxes and printing, and getting this information quickly about customers and email was very revolutionary. So the big lesson there, you are not your customer. Put your customer first and think about what your customer needs. One of those needs is often segmentation. For Ferguson, for B2B company, it's a little easier because they were able to segment by the type of role that the person had in the company. But for a B2C company, like in this case Finish Line, that can be a bigger challenge because customers aren't as easily segmented sometimes, right, Jessica?
Right, and I think that's what Aaron Buchanan, the digital personalization manager at Finish Line, taught us. His overall lesson that we learned is that we need to align marketing efforts for a multi-channel approach. And one of the things that I admired about his case study the most is that it was very customer first. And he said it's less about which channel customers are from and more about serving them at any touch point they are in the most relevant way. So what they did was they looked at, they segmented at first by purchasing preference, whether that the customer is more into fashion forward shoes, if they're technical runners, or if they just like to look like they're athletic. I have a few friends like that. So first they looked at their shopping preferences, and then they relied on more complex segmentation because they're, as you mentioned earlier, Daniel, like the options are so vast for B2C. Even if location is relevant, you can offend somebody on the opposite side of town by sending them the incorrect team. I know I grew up in Southern California, and if you were to send my father an email trying to sell him UCLA gear, that just wouldn't fly, and he likely would not buy from your company. So really leveraging customer behavior, how they're engaging with you on social media, tracking them throughout their customer journey and their lifetime. People's preferences change, their needs change. I looked into going to USC like my father in high school, and I ended up going to Penn State. And now I live in Florida. So if they were relying on geolocation for me, they would have their work cut out for them. It's a very, very tricky for B2C companies, I think, to follow their customer journey. And it really paid off for them. They saw a 50% increase in email revenue for trigger-based programs. And this is my overall favorite quote from Email Summit, I believe, is honor the conversation the customer is having with you and your brand via their actions across all of your channels. So again, having the right conversation can extend your value to your customer, and don't alienate your customers with hyper-segmentation.
So in just a moment, I want to talk about Microsoft Store story. We had Lisa Kay on, I see on hashtag Sherpa Email. She said she's a freelance copywriter looking for some creative samples. We're going to look at Microsoft Stores in a second. We have a question here from Carl. He says, how frequently should I email my prospects and customers as a B2B marketer to generate leads? So as part of that survey that I mentioned in the beginning of the webinar, one thing we asked was how frequently customers want to receive emails. And 86% told us they want to receive, and this was promotional emails, a little different from B2B, but 86% told us they want to receive them at least monthly, and 15% said they want to receive them daily. So what this tells me is back to both what Finish Line and Ferguson are doing. It really comes down to understanding your customer and segmenting your list. So you can measure open rate data, you can measure engagement rate data, and using that data, then you can segment your list to how frequently people want to receive information. Because if you have, for example, that exact same setup where 15% of your list wants to receive information daily, let's say, and you're only sending it weekly, well, you're underserving those customers. And then that 86% who only wants to receive it, at least monthly, maybe a big group only wants it once a month, when you're sending it weekly, you're overserving those customers. So one thing you can do, look at your click data, look at your engagement data, try to set up some segments along those lines. If you can't do that, try to run some testing to see how frequency affects your overall list. And also, you can have a preference center and just simply ask people, hey, how often do you want to receive information from me? Because that email should help you generate leads and should help you further a conversation with your customers, but it should do so by actually serving the customer in the way they want it. So we want to think of what we need as marketers, which is to generate leads, but we want to think of how can we best serve our customers to do that. So I hope that's helpful to you, Carl. But let's talk about Shauna Dallin now, Senior Email Marketing Manager at the Microsoft Store. So we talked about Finish Line. I was actually talking to Aaron backstage, and he mentioned it took him about 4 years to get to the point where he is today, right? He attended, I think, a similar conference, or he saw some similar information about personalization and segmentation. He wanted to get there with Finish Line. It took him 4 years. So if you're watching today, understand that it can be a long journey, and that's what Shauna Dallin was facing. So the Microsoft Store, we assume Microsoft is a big company. Everything must be perfect, right? This is something I hear a lot from marketers at small companies anytime they see a case study from a big company. Well, I don't have all of those resources. They have everything figured out. It's just me or one other person or two other people. Well, even at big companies, this can be a struggle because smaller companies tend to have a little bit more of a simple setup, more simple ways to pull data. They're probably closer to their customers, and that closeness to their customers can help them create more relevant information. Well, a giant company like Microsoft, they're trying to get closer to their customers by utilizing data, but there's so much complexity to deal with. And so what Shauna did is she set out an 18-month plan of how to get where she wanted her email to be, through the right acquisition of technology and people. But in the meantime, she didn't just wait until she got to perfection. She did the same thing you should do. She saw, how can I kind of put a bandage on what I have to still serve the customer the best we can, even though we don't have everything we want. And the best thing you can learn from the slide you're looking at right now is those orange arrows. So the green dotted arrows, those are automated pulls. So that's great. She could automatically pull the information she wanted using technology. But she also realized that there is information that could be helpful to help segment her list, to help get relevant information to her list, and she just didn't have the technology in place yet, so she used manual pulls. So don't overlook the fact that sometimes you can just manually get that information, get it into perhaps a simple Excel spreadsheet, and use that information to improve your email marketing. Don't wait until you have the perfect technology in place. Of course, don't overlook the fact that you probably want to get to the point where you have that technology. So here are some other ideas on how you can use existing resources, and here's some of the things that Microsoft Store did. Anyone who is customer-facing in your organization, for example, customer service reps, can give you a wealth of information about what customers are talking about on the phone or what customers are asking about, and that can help you create promotions and content that is more relevant to your audience, because as we know, relevance is king when it comes to email. Post-purchase surveys, or really any surveys in the process, actually asking your customers what they want, but also keeping in mind, looking at that information with a bit of a caveat, with a bit of a grain of salt. Because a lot of times when you ask people what they want, they don't always know. So it's great to have that survey information, but then on the back end you can run some A/B testing to actually see what customers are, how they're actually performing, how they're actually reacting to your emails when they're not telling you what they want, when they're actually going through your content or going through your promotions. In-store associates, if there's a brick and mortar location, or it could be, if you're a B2B company, there could be sales reps. Again, you can take it with a grain of salt sometimes, because customers aren't always honest why they don't buy, but you can use it as an indication to set up your testing. And then also cross-company product groups, because the people actually creating the products can give you a lot of ideas about how you can better talk about those products. So to Lisa Kay and any other freelance copywriter or anyone else creating content, here's an example of how Microsoft was able to personalize their emails. So we're seeing now, this was a receipt from the brick and mortar store, right? And if you're looking to build your email list, that can be also a great way to get some more emails on your list. Ask them for that email address and say you can email them a receipt, and you can also send them some more information. In this case, the thing I want you to pay attention to is how much real estate they were using before for the order details and how much real estate they're using now. They're able to shrink the amount of time they spent on the order details. The same is true for their exchange info. Again, they had a lot of information for their exchange info. They realized, you know what, we can just link to that information. Customers still want it, but we don't have to take up that real estate. So So this presented a great opportunity, right? They were able to present information about related products, and this is where copywriters come in. They're very helpful, thinking through, okay, what did they purchase? So what do we know about them so far? What did they purchase? Where are they located? What information do we have? And then what segments can we create based on that to help to present some information that's helpful in that email about related products, but also how they can get the best use of that product, right? Because when you think about some of the things you'd purchase from a Microsoft or like many companies, it's a piece of software, it's a piece of technology. You're going to be a happier customer. You're going to be less likely to return it. You're going to be likely to buy more things if you get the best use of that product. So don't only think of the upsells, also think of different customer service information you can provide in there. So Microsoft Store, this is now what their customer journey looks like. You see they have promotional emails where they have small and medium businesses now a segment, not just their customer segment. They have ratings and reviews they're able to include in their transactional emails. They have an entire life cycle email, from what's going on at holidays to knowing people don't purchase anymore. And they came a long way in creating this. So this is what they had before. So again, if you're in this boat where you've only got a few of these types of emails, you can see how Microsoft Store was able to grow that over a short amount of time with really a small amount of resources, even though they're a big company. And Kentucky Derby is another great example of how a brand learned about its customers to provide them better email.
Right, and so we just looked at Microsoft. Something that we're going to look at now is Kentucky Derby, who also didn't have the resources that they would have liked to segment their customers. And Kate and Jeff were probably had the most fun at Email Summit, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, they gave me my first mint julep. I had never drinking a mint julep before, so thank you, Jeff Kaliba, for my first mint julep.
Thank you, Kate and Jeff, for making Email Summit so much fun. So they didn't have a lot of information, though. They didn't have a lot of customer details, but they did know that all of their content wasn't relevant to everybody that they were trying to engage with, and they also had a very limited window of relevance. So the Kentucky Derby happens once a year, and it's hard to keep that engagement up all throughout the year, especially right after the event is over. So what they did to really figure out more about who their customers were was they sent out this newsletter. And based on they developed this newsletter by putting together three hypotheses on who their customers were. They divided them into a social segment, an equine segment, and a segment for handicappers. So the Kentucky Derby means a lot of things to a lot of different people, whether it is a family get-together or they have a horse that they're betting on. It draws a lot of people there for a lot of different reasons, and they've found that they could best serve their customers by knowing what motivates them to engage with them. And so, in addition to this, they were also able to segment based on whether or not they had purchased a ticket to the Kentucky Derby. So they essentially went from one newsletter going out to 6 newsletters going out. So Dan and I both work on content. One newsletter is hard and is a challenge in itself, but 6 is really ambitious.
And so Paul wants to know about to talk about subject lines and how to make effective subject lines. So this next example Jessica's going to show, I think, is a great example of sometimes it's the way in which you write the subject lines, but sometimes it's how you learn about the customer so you can create the most relevant messaging to their needs, right, as we see in these subject lines.
Right. So for Kentucky Derby, what they did with this segment, it was in the social influencer segment, and for the purchasers, the subject line was "Start planning your hat." Whereas the non-purchaser segment was "Start planning your party in your hat," because for the non-purchasers, they're more likely to throw a party on the day of the Kentucky Derby, and those that purchase a ticket are more likely to actually go to the Kentucky Derby. And as you can see on this newsletter here, that's specifically for the social segment, they also included other content. And this is just to monitor engagement and to prioritize content based on the segment. So some of the content that they included in each newsletter was a mix of the equine content and the gaming content with the social content. So all this was included in their newsletters. It was just they used click data to prioritize how their newsletters were laid out. And they also developed content on social media. So what they were promising in their social and lifestyle content could link to something on a social platform. This is an example from Pinterest for further engagement with their brand. And it also provided a leverage for sales and sponsorship content so that they knew whether or not a ticket was purchased and how to speak to those people, or if a ticket wasn't purchased, how they could speak to those people, getting the right message to the right people. And ultimately, they learned a ton about their customer. They found that many people who engaged with their newsletters engaged for the social content. And they got a sense of the segment size through they saw that customers, I'm sorry.
So I think what they saw here is they got a sense of the different size of the different segments of their customers. So if you have 3 different segments of customers, right, it's not necessarily a third, a third, a third. They got an understanding of how important that social element was to Kentucky Derby. That's something they had their guesses, like you said, their hypotheses before.
Yeah.
But when we think of Kentucky Derby, I mean, you think of buying a ticket, you think of gambling, you think of the horses. Well, as they learned, 52% really care about the social element, like the mint juleps that they bought us.
Yeah, exactly. And you could see that customers in the end, the opt-out rate plummeted by 94%. So by really learning about their customers and what kind of content they wanted to engage with, their customers said, yes, we want to hear from you. And the read rate went up by 30% too. So you can see that this investment in content really paid off for the Kentucky Derby and their customers.
Yeah, and help them learn more about their customers. So we have a few minutes left, and you may be thinking at this point, okay, Dan, Jessica, I get it. We need to segment. Here's how we can get information out to our email list that will make them effective email lists. But how do I build that email list to begin with, right? Because you can't do any of these tactics we talked about if you don't build an email list, if you don't have people to email to. And so we're recommending an opt-in email list. And one way that Diana Primo, Director of Member Services at CNET, built the member list for CNET, and if you're not familiar with CNET, it's a technical information company. They're sending millions and millions and millions of emails to very, very large lists. So she builds, one of the tactics she uses is to build with incentives, right? It's like a sweepstakes, for example. Now, this is effective for her. But it's not effective only because she's got that incentive. It's effective what she does after she captures that email address, after people say they want to subscribe. So it's interesting. Sweepstakes, I think, and other incentives are a little controversial for email marketers. So in planning this email summit was our 10th email summit. It was our 10th anniversary. And in planning it, we looked way back to 2006 at our first email summit. And one of the takeaways from one of the marketers was, hey, sweepstakes don't work. You can get people to subscribe, but they're going to opt out. They're not going to engage. Everyone's just going to drop off the list. Well, you can see the results here from Diana. So of new users who entered sweepstakes, after 61 to 90 days, 25% are still engaged. For current users, that number is up to almost 50%. So you'll never get 100%, but she's got a good chunk of the people that entered still engaged. And one of the ways to do this is, I'm not saying any sweepstakes or incentive would work. You want a sweepstakes or incentive that is tied to the motivation of your company. So for example, if you sell organic cheese and you're giving away an iPad, you may see a bigger drop off because iPads, the motivation to want to win an iPad is not necessarily close to the motivation to want to win organic cheese. However, if you give out a cheese plate or a cheese membership or something like that, you're likely attracting people who are more interested in your type of content. But it doesn't end there. You can't just get people who are interested in your content and then just send them random junk. So what was very important to Diana is, how do I welcome people? How do I keep them engaged to my list? So one of the things, as you saw in the previous chart, sweepstakes were helpful because not only new people entered the sweepstakes, not only people who are new to the email list, but people who had been on the email list, so she's re-engaging those. But then for the people that are new, the question is, how does she welcome them on and bring them into the list? So you'll see this is the welcome email that they were using. There's a lot of information there. Like maybe your company, there's all different information they want them to know about. In her case, product reviews, tech news, more newsletters. In your case, it might be different products, different divisions, social media, all these different things to follow. So to learn about her audience, Diana decided to test. She tested content, subject lines, advertisements. I'm going to show you briefly. Here's some more examples of email you can see. She had 6 different tests she set up. In this example, it was much simpler content. She showed a picture of the editor. So that's something to think about. Can you bring any human dynamic to your emails so people feel like they actually are dealing with a human being? In another example, they had not a picture but an ad in there. They're a content company. Ads are important, but they don't want to put ads in there and get the revenue if it's going to hurt their actual overall email list and their list sustainability too much. They had another example where they changed the subject line to "Thanks for joining, let's get started." Previously, it had "Welcome to CNET" in the subject line, so that's another thing you can play with and test. They had a bigger, richer image. That was one example. And they had another example where they had an ad in the bottom, but they also had related resources. So the overall results and the biggest takeaway from this is they all created a lift, a very significant lift. If you look, she had about a 12% click-through rate to now about 20%. So one thing for her audience she learned, she needs to have a simpler welcome email. So for your audience, I think the lesson to learn is maybe simpler works, but test to learn. So then the question becomes, if my welcome email is simpler, how do I get all this information out there to them? So they had a nurturing drip campaign of the different information they sent. And you can see first they were sending information about social media, then about mobile, then about videos. And so they tried switching up the order in which they sent, because mobile was the most popular email. So they said, let's start with mobile. Well, the surprising thing, just by changing the order, there was a huge difference. The engagement with the mobile email dropped more than 50%. So they changed it back to what they had, and they ended up getting increases from that. So another lesson there, drip out the information that you need to send to your audience, but test in what order you send it, because you could be really surprised at a small thing like changing the order of how you send them can really have a vast difference in your emails. So that's all the time we have for to tell you about Email Summit today. So thank you, Jessica.
Thanks, Dan. It was great to be here and speak to our audience. So thank you for tuning in today.
Absolutely. But there's plenty more email and marketing lessons in general on marketingsherpa.com. So please join us throughout the year as we share case studies and charts and lots of information to help you do your job better.